Lifetime ISAs. Some people call them a LISA, other people call them a LISA, but they're probably the most misunderstood of all of the ISA options. So in today's video, we're going to do a rundown of what a LISA is, how you use them, and answer some of the common questions that I get around this ISA product. We're then going to do a rundown of some of the best options available on the market currently, and I'm going to tell you which LISA I plan to use this year. Trust me, it wasn't an easy decision. But before we get started, first of all, a question. Who's your favourite Lisa? Maybe it's Lisa Kudrow, the zany, off-the-wall actress who played Phoebe in Friends. But honestly, she's probably my least favourite friend. I'm more of a Miss Chenan LeBon kind of guy, plus Ursula was way hotter. Dude, they're played by the same person. How about Lisa from The Simpsons? But we can't have a cartoon as the best ever Lisa, surely. How about Lisa Del Giocondo? I mean, I don't know about her. I heard she was a bit of a moaner. Kind of explains that smile, I guess. Okay, Lisa from Blackpink. I have no idea who that is, but I needed to include at least one person that you didn't need to be over 30 to know who it was. Blackpink in your area? Okay, I don't know who that is. Personally, I like my Lisas of the left eye variety. I mean, songs like Waterfalls, No Scrubs and Unpretty might not have the lyrical prowess of a song like Smelly Cat. What are they feeding you? But 26 years after they were released, those songs still get me moving every time I hear them. If last week's video on stocks and shares ISAs was all about being sport for choice, then this week's theme is the complete opposite. Trying to think of famous Lisas for that intro was tough, as there really aren't that many. In the same way, there are only actually 15 lifetime ISAs on the market we can choose from, which also isn't that many. Now I'm fully prepared for a load of comments pointing out famous Lisas I have missed off. So I'll tell you what, in the comment section below, put your most famous Lisa that I missed off, and whoever wins gets 20 quid and the comment pinned. I won't accept Lisa Marie Presley, because in my book, just because your daddy's Elvis and you married Michael Jackson don't make you famous. No, I have to sing the no so I don't get a copyright strike, so yeah, enjoy that. But in last week's video, I assumed that everyone knew what stocks and shares ISA was. This week's video, I'm not going to do that because a LISA is a little bit more misunderstood. So first of all, let's just run through the key features and characteristics of a lifetime ISA, starting with what is a LISA?
Who is she? Who is she?
A lifetime ISA allows you to save up to £4,000 a year either towards the purchase of your first home or towards retirement. And anything that you put in, the government will top up 25%. So if you put the full £4,000 allowance in each year, the government will give you £1,000 cold hard cash completely free. Now it's worth mentioning at this point, you can put less in than £4,000 if you like. The £4,000 is a limit, it's not a target. Who can use a lifetime ISA? The lifetime ISA was introduced to help young people either get on the property ladder or save for retirement. For that reason, it has a few specific rules around the contributions and age limits. For example, you need to be either between the ages of 18 and 39 to open one. You can't pay into it past the age of 50. And to add to the confusion, you can't take money out until the age of 60 unless it's for the purchase of your first home. Now you can access the money early if you want to, but there'll be a 25% penalty for any early withdrawals. So in reality, if you're saving into a lifetime ISA, you need to be committed to either buying your first home or saving until you're 60. There are discussions about expanding the range of options that allow you to access a lifetime ISA, but at the minute, first home and when you're 60. That's it. When is the bonus paid?
Show me the money.
The government normally pays in the bonus on a monthly basis, but it can take up to 8 weeks for that to first kick in. But if you're investing into your LISA on a monthly basis, you should see cash rolling in every month. Now it's worth noting that if you want to use the LISA to buy your first home with, you have to have been using the LISA for 12 months before you can buy your house and get the bonus. So you can't just slap £4,000 into a LISA, get a £3,000 off Rishi and the boys and off ski. You have to have used it for 12 months first. So one of the best things about having a lifetime ISA is you can use it in conjunction with the other types of ISAs. So you could have a lifetime ISA at the same time as having a stocks and shares ISA. So as an example, if you maximise the contribution into a lifetime ISA on a yearly basis of £4,000, that leaves you with £16,000 to put in other types of ISAs, as you get a 20k limit across all of the ISAs each financial year. You can also have a stocks and shares lifetime ISA as well as a stocks and shares ISA at the same time. You just couldn't have two stocks and shares ISAs, for example. Now, another important thing to note is if you max out the contribution into the lifetime ISA of £4,000 and then stick another £16,000 into, say, a stocks and shares ISA, so you hit the 20k limit, the £1,000 that you get from the government into your ISA doesn't count towards the limit. That's on top of the limit. Have I lost you? No. So the way I see it is I like the flexibility of a normal stocks and shares ISA because I know no matter how big my investments get inside of it, they're going to be tax-free and I can access that money whenever I like for life's emergencies.
Did you know that Depp spent $3 million to blast Hunter S. Thompson's ashes out of a cannon?
But when it comes to the stocks and shares ISA, it doesn't have the 25% top up. And let's face it, that 25% top up is juicy. If you've watched my content for a while, first of all, I'm sorry, you poor thing, but if you have watched my content for a while, then you will know that when it comes to my work-based pension, I match the contribution and then I don't really contribute any more than that. The reason I match the contribution my employer will pay in is because they double my money instantly. It's a 100% guaranteed return. That is the best investment I make on a monthly basis because it's an instant 100% guaranteed return. Now, while the lifetime ISA isn't 100%, it's still a 25% guaranteed return. And I can't get that through a stocks and shares ISA. Even though I might get massive returns on some stocks and shares, sometimes none of them are guaranteed. This 25% is a guaranteed return. And that's why I like the lifetime ISA. Add to this the fact you don't just have to have a cash ISA. You can have a stocks and shares one. And you can see how the government is literally giving you free cash to invest with. So you can have a stocks and shares ISA at the same time you have a stocks and shares ISA. Now, the whole not being able to access the money until you're 60 is a bit of a bummer. But look, we're all going to be 60 at some point and you'll be grateful for the cash then, trust me. If you don't make it to 60, you can leave the funds to someone as part of your estate. Now, if you're diagnosed as terminally ill, you can access the funds early without penalty. I pray that no one watching this video ever finds himself in that set of circumstances, but those are the rules, so it's important that you know them. It's also important that you consider the fact that some people watching this video will probably be better off with something called a SIPP than they would with a LISA. I'm not going to go into the details today as that's a video for another day, but what I'll do is I'll link an article in the description that covers off the differences between the SIPP and the LISA so you can weigh them up before you make a decision. Should I use a cash LISA or should I use a stocks and shares one? It's my opinion, and ultimately that's all this video and any of the others I ever make is. I'm not a qualified financial advisor. If you want advice tailored to your own circumstances, go seek one out. But it's my opinion that if you're saving to buy a house and you think it's going to take you longer than 12 months to save, you should be using a LISA, because otherwise you're leaving money on the table. I mean, even if you just stick £4,000 in the 12 months, then you're going to get £3,000 towards the house purchase cost. It's going to cover your solicitor's fees at least. Now, I would personally use a cash LISA for the house deposit, as I wouldn't risk the house deposit on the stock market. But as my friend Sasha has pointed out in a video he did on LISAs, you are getting a 25% top up on top of your funds, which gives you a buffer in the markets. So if they do go the wrong way, you've got that 25% built-in insurance, I guess. So if you wanted to, you could risk your house deposit within a stocks and shares LISA, but you do run the risk of losing money. The house needs to be under £450,000 and you need to be using a mortgage, so you can't be a cash buyer. It's also worth noting that you can combine allowances. So if you have a partner and you're looking to buy together, you can both have your own LISA. Now that doesn't apply to me, so I use my lifetime ISA as a means of saving for my retirement at 60. I don't max out the contribution because, to be honest with you, I don't have enough money at the minute to max out the contribution and still pay into my stocks and shares ISA what I would like. Some of you might ask, why not just focus on the LISA instead to get the maximum government contribution? Well, I'm a dreamer and I dream of early retirement. So I focus on my stocks and shares ISA because I want that to support me in early retirement. But to be honest with you, I also know myself and I know that I'm going to run through that stocks and shares ISA money pretty quick. So I want the assurance of having some money in the background for when I turn 60, just because, you know, I'll be clucking for some cash by that time, I'm sure. I personally wouldn't be putting cash into a LISA for retirement, as I feel I'm missing out on 30 years worth of stock market returns. And while past performance is no guarantee of future performance, 30-year timeline for me personally is great. Historically, I've used Hargreaves Lansdown as my LISA provider because really they were one of the only providers available at the time that I was looking to open one. Now there's a few more providers on the market, so let's take a look at some of the best providers that are out there and just compare them and see which one we think is good. I'll be assessing them on two main factors: the fees they charge and the investments they offer us to choose from. I won't cover all 15 because that'll take absolutely ages, so I've picked out 4 that I think represent two broad styles of investing. You have your DIY platforms, we have lots of control over your investments. Here we have AJ Bell and Hargreaves Lansdown. And then we have robo-investors who do the work for you. And in here we've included Moneybox and Nutmeg. Before we dive into this, I just want to say that while compiling all of this information, I couldn't help but get frustrated at how overly complicated all these fee structures are. I hope all of this makes sense because we are about to dive headfirst down a rabbit hole into percentages and dealing fees. Honestly, it took me about 2 to 3 hours to work all this out. Should have just done a bloody ASMR or cooking channel. In terms of the fees, you have your fixed platform fees, like Moneybox is £1 a month. Then there's the ongoing charges or percentage platform fees. Now it's important that we consider both the platform charge and any percentage fees that you charge for investing in particular investments. You add these together and you get a total percentage you charge on a yearly basis. Now because the robos do it for you and pick your investments, I've taken the fee they apply or an average fee based on the choices they have available. With the DIY platforms, I have looked to select similar funds so the comparison is fair. For HL, it's the HSBC All World Index with an annual fee of 0.12%. And for AJ Bell, I've picked the Fidelity Index World Fund with a fee of 0.13%. Now I picked these because they're world index funds focusing on similar investments and they're cheap. Now the final fees to consider are dealing fees, so any costs applied for buying shares or funds. Now the robo-investing platforms don't have dealing fees because they only have a limited selection of fund-based investments for you to invest in. AJ Bell and Hargreaves Lansdown do have dealing fees, but they're really expensive. So for that reason, the illustrations that I've put together today where we compare the fees, I've based it around just buying index funds essentially, because that's what I would be doing. I wouldn't be investing in individual shares through AJ Bell or Hargreaves Lansdown on these platforms, because let's face it, you could just use 212 or free trade where it's much cheaper. So inside of my LISA, I'd have an index fund strategy for the long term rather than focusing on individual shares, because I think the fees that these platforms charge for individual shares are pretty debilitating. I would just focus on 212 and free trade for my individual shares through a normal stocks and shares ISA, which is so much cheaper. Final disclaimer. I've based the calculation on a contribution of £200 a month, which is £2,400 a year. And then I've assumed the £600 from the government, so a total of 3k going into the LISA each year. I've not factored in for any growth on the investments, which would obviously increase the amount of money in the pot and also increase the fees accordingly as well, because basically growth on investments is an unknown factor, when in reality it will fluctuate. So we'll just do the calculations based on the 3k so you can get a rough comparison across the 4 options. I've also applied the fees on an annual basis because breaking it down monthly was just hurting my head. AJ Bell charges a 0.25% fee. They mention a cap on this fee once you get to a certain amount invested, but that actually only applies to shares and not to index funds. And because this example is based around index fund investing, the cap doesn't apply. So it's 0.25% forever. They then have the investment fee, which in this case is 0.13%. They also charge you £1.50 every time you buy a fund. I've assumed for this example I'm going to buy one fund each and every month. So that's £18 worth of fund purchase costs on an annual basis. Of course, if you use AJ Bell, you can buy more funds than this, but that cost will just increase with the amount of funds that you're buying on a monthly basis. So bear that in mind and don't be collecting funds like this dude collects newspapers.
Oh, blimey.
Richard Wallace is an extreme hoarder who lives in squalor.
HL don't have a fund purchase fee, so you could buy as many funds as you want on a monthly basis and not be charged for that transaction. The percentage fee on the funds does vary though, so keep your eye on that. And the 0.45% that HL charges is fixed. It does mention on the website that after you reach a certain amount of assets with them, they will reduce the percentage fee. That's 250 grand. And I mean, when you can put £4,000 a year into a lifetime ISA, 250 grand isn't going to happen anytime soon, is it? No. In the description below is a calculator from AJ Bell that will compare the fees at different amounts invested with different levels of fund purchases each year. And it compares it with Hargreaves Lansdown. Wish I'd known about this before I spent 3 hours cracking the Enigma code. It is worth noting though, looking at the calculations, I don't actually think they include fund fees in it. I did. Nutmeg's cheapest investment option has a management fee of 0.45% and an average investment cost of 0.19%. And Moneybox has a £1 a month flat fee, a platform fee of 0.45%, and fund fees between 0.12 and 0.3%. So let's cut it straight down the middle and call it an average fund fee of 0.21%. Honestly though, why couldn't they just go, look mate, it's £10 a month flat fee, take it or leave it. I would take it rather than all of this. But anyway, here's the results of the first year's fee. So in this first year, as you can see, when you have a lower amount invested, any platform that has a fixed fee or a fund purchase fee like AJ Bell suffers compared to the others. In year 2, it's a similar story, but you can see the gap has narrowed due to the fact that the higher management fees of the likes of HL are now starting to catch up. And then we got year 3. AJ is now the cheapest, as the fixed £1.50 fee is being offset by the lower annual percentage charge. And this trend continues, with the higher percentage fees becoming more and more expensive compared to AJ Bell over time because of their lower 0.25% fee, even with the £1.50 fund charge. Now this only applies if you buy in one fund. Obviously if you buy multiple funds on a monthly basis, it's going to take longer for HL to outstrip AJ Bell in terms of fees. Who is the cheapest is not a clear-cut answer. Initially HL is, but over time they become one of the more expensive. In any case, the robo-investors are more expensive, but the fixed fee on Moneybox will always mean it is more expensive than Nutmeg. So if you're wanting a platform that takes the decision away from you, it seems like Nutmeg is the cheapest, as long as you pick their cheapest fund option. They also offer more expensive options, like where they offer to manage your investments for you actively with a fee of around 0.7%. Interestingly, the managed portfolio has performed worse than the cheapest one in the last 12 months. So in the words of TLC, what was looking like class is now looking like trash. I joke, but just because something's more expensive doesn't mean it's better. With the DIY platforms in this example, it will take 3 years for AJ Bell to become the cheapest yearly, but the gap widens a lot as time goes on. But remember, this is assuming you only buy one fund every month. Obviously, if you want to invest in more funds, you need to factor in that cost. If you're buying 4 funds every single month, that's an extra £54 a year in fees. So if you want to buy multiple funds monthly, then HL may be a better option. If you're only after one fund, then AJ Bell will be cheaper in the long run. The key thing is, in the early years, really the fees are much of a muchness, with only £13 separating the top and the bottom in this example. And don't forget that £600 of that cash is given to you by the government, and that kind of offsets the fees, I guess. As well as that, I haven't factored in any investment returns into my calculation. We simply looked at just the initial balance. But yeah, the fees are nowhere near as drastic as if you're comparing, say, HL for buying shares to 212 or Freetrade. As is always the case, the robo-investors are just charging a premium for the convenience that they offer. And behind the scenes, really, they're just buying index funds. I'll be using AJ Bell, as I think for me personally, with the funds I have in my LISA already, it's now cheaper than HL, and will continue to be in the future. But if I was starting out, I wouldn't personally be that fussed about the fee difference in the short term. I will monitor new entries into the LISA market each year and see if anything comes along that is really enticing or a hell of a lot cheaper. But it's all about getting that government bonus and having that pot of cash at 60 to save me when I've blown all my stocks and shares ISA in Vegas. No!